The following video contains personal stories of Indigenous people who have experienced homelessness. Drug use, violence, foster care, residential school, and recounting traumatic experiences are discussed. Residential school survivors, their families, and Indigenous people dealing with intergenerational trauma can access mental health and crisis supports through the Indian Residential School Survivors Society at 1-800-721-0066. Others affected by this content can call 310 Mental Health at 310-6789.
This is Gingosh. It is my family's home. Walking through the forest near Gingosh, I feel the history of the place of trees. I sense time of another having lived. I walk where my grandfather walked. It is familiar without having been there. It is knowing my place. It is knowing my space. I carry it with me, with it in my heart. I know respect.
Simigiget sigram hanak cool sick Lugiget why Niskani Wobdakani kicking gosh. Wamskaram Mokasam. My English name is Patrick Stewart. My Niska name is Lukigio. I'm a member of the Killer Whale House of Dakin, the Niska village of Kingosh. I was born homeless. So when I was born, my mom was homeless. And the hospital wouldn't let her take me from there because she was homeless. She had no place to take me. So I was left at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. From the hospital, though, I went into care, and I grew up in care. I aged out at 19. For me now, when I look back on the work that I do, I always consider kids in care as being homeless because security of tenure is not there. I just remember months and years of wondering if I'm going to stay where I am or am I going to be moved, and it's not a good feeling to have. I tried to go to school on that basis, and I just had too many anxieties, I think. Wondering, okay, social worker gonna show up, or am I gonna be moved? I don't know. And I just worried. I think I was just a constant worrier.
What comes to mind when you think of home? Is home a structure with 4 walls where we go inside, eat, play, rest, and are out of sight? Is home where the heart is? Or is home wherever we are? Is home individual ownership of a space or private property that can be bought and sold? These shared ideas have come to shape Western and Canadian understandings of home. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Indigenous worldviews are distinct from these perspectives. In many Indigenous worldviews, home is circles of relationships that come together to form healthy communities and feelings of deep-rootedness. In English, these circles of relationships are known among many Indigenous peoples as all my relations. Home is a person's place in nature, their relationships, and their connection to community and territory. From many Indigenous perspectives, home is more than a built structure. Home is holistic and reciprocal. Home is more about cultural connections than any built structure. Home is made up of the relationships and connections to the land and nature, other living things, culture, community, identity, and spirituality. Colonization in Canada brought different values that favored and reinforced home as a built structure that a person lives in and can be bought, sold, and profited from. These two different ways of understanding what home is have been at the center of Canada's conflict between settlers and Indigenous peoples. And the effects have been devastating. In 2021, 39% of survey respondents in the point-in-time homeless counts in BC identified as Indigenous, but they represent only 6% of the population. Patrick Stewart, a member of the Niska Nation, architect and chair of the Provincial Indigenous Homelessness Committee in BC, has been working alongside the Luma Native Housing Society to advise on the point-in-time counts for Indigenous peoples experiencing homelessness.
Point-in-time counts are done federally mandated every 3 years. As a point-in-time count, it takes a snapshot of the number of people that are homeless at one night, and it tries to get an idea of who's on the street, who's in shelter. It's always recognized as being an undercount because, not everybody, you can't find everybody.
These point-in-time counts are like a single picture taken at a single moment in time every 3 years. It does not tell the story of how a person arrived in the picture. What's more, the picture is also blurry and missing information.
It's a work in progress, and we're still attempting to influence how the count is run, what questions are asked, but there's still a long way to go because, for example, there's a big portion of the population that we don't talk to or know much about, and that's hidden homelessness. People that are hidden homeless are people that are either couch surfing, staying with family, in hospitals, in remand centers, all those places that nobody really goes and finds out.
The kinds of questions point-in-time counts ask and the data they collect reinforce colonial understandings of home. They favor the idea that home is a built structure where a person lives instead of a person's circles of relationships. And they do not tell the whole story of Indigenous homelessness, which involves the negative impacts and lived realities of colonial policies and practices. Bernice Carmano, an Indigenous outreach worker in Victoria, BC, shares the key challenges in helping Indigenous peoples experiencing homelessness from within colonial systems.
The majority of the people that I work with have either gone through the foster care system, residential school, or a combination of both. So they react in two ways. They're either aggressive and people say they're angry, and it's difficult for them to connect or even do the work around getting them situated in housing, however that looks. And the other side of that is people are so quiet. They won't even respond to anyone. And that's really challenging because they just slip through the cracks.
Because of the bias within our systems and institutions that favor a colonial and Western understanding of home and homelessness, Indigenous peoples have explored ways to define homelessness better. A definition of homelessness that will tell their story and better serve Indigenous people facing homelessness.
We've really never had homelessness growing as our ancestors, but now we do. And they're just over the hill here in our own territory. And that bugs me more than anything, I guess, is the lack of action that our communities have to reach out and pull our people back to where they belong. They're walking around with no place to live in their own homeland. So when we're talking Indigenous homelessness, I really don't think it's homelessness. We have homes. We have our traditional territory is our home. And we don't have any place to live in our own territories.
Many Indigenous worldviews don't define sleeping rough or lacking a built structure to live in as homelessness. Instead, these are understood to be the symptoms of homelessness. Over hundreds of years of colonization and the deliberate destruction of Indigenous homes by the Canadian state, the circles of relationships that once rooted Indigenous peoples have been severely damaged, undermined, and displaced. From conversations with Indigenous peoples, leaders, and researchers across Canada, 13 circles of homelessness have been identified that more fully share their stories. These 13 circles aren't a complete list, but they can help us to see the picture more clearly and guide our path through the forest. Historic displacement from Indigenous lands during the height of colonization. Ongoing separation of an individual or community from Indigenous lands and territories as a result of colonial control. Spiritual disconnection from Indigenous worldviews and beliefs. Mental disruption and imbalance from colonial policies that marginalize Indigenous peoples on a social and economic level. Loss of cultural identity and loss of Indigenous circles of relationships. Overcrowded, unsafe, and unhealthy living spaces. Lack of access to work, education, recreation, and essential services. Lack of access to safe, stable, and culturally appropriate shelter and housing. Difficulty moving back to home communities due to lack of housing, discrimination, or disconnection. Escaping or fleeing from harm. Natural and man-made disasters, as well as inadequate emergency plans and services. Escaping the effects of climate change, causing drastic changes in subsistence patterns, food sources, and relationships to the land. The ongoing destructive impact of the child welfare system in Canada, which deprives Indigenous children of the circles of relationships that root and nourish them. These 13 circles of disconnection layer on top of one another to create Indigenous homelessness in Canada and enable it to take root. Indigenous peoples are working to reconnect the circles of relationships that once defined Indigenous societies. A return to Indigenous visions of home will light our pathway forward. Auntie Glow, an elder at the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness, shares that vision.
The main goal is to make tomorrow a better place for our people who are living away from home. You can't just put them in an apartment and say, that's it. It's just being there or out for a forest walk or have the opportunity to go with our spiritual leader, Fred, and just reconnect with Mother Earth. They don't have that opportunity in the city. The noise, the cement, having to line up, and the systemic racism, where when they come into our presence, they've got their dignity back. They are treated with dignity and, as I say, non-judgmental, and it's just that love.
Here are 11 stories, 11 different people and organizations. They are each, in their ways, lighting the pathway home for themselves and others. And we hope that these 10 stories will spark your imagination and belief in the transformative power of Indigenous knowledge and ways of being, and that they cultivate trust, hope, healing, and empowerment. Together, we can reimagine new approaches to housing and home that build cultural self-identity, dignity, family, and purpose. Our systems will change, and so will our communities. But the change won't feel like a change at all. It will feel familiar, even though we've never been there before.
When you're feeling so lost, pray to Waka that you find your way.
So what happens is a lot of our people are running from their traumas, and they run and they end up down here. And unfortunately, this may be the last place they'll ever see with the opioid crisis that's going on and the lifestyle that they lead. They've adapted. So and I've heard this many times, I've been asked from many bands, can you check up on this person? Can you check up on this person? And they sent a picture, and I'd luckily find them. And I'd say, yeah, your chief asked me to look into you, see if you're okay. And on 2-3 occasions, that person would, in the alley, in that doorway, soaking wet, cold, hungry, they'd start crying. And when they finish crying, they go, I can't believe my nation cares about me. I can't believe my family cares about me. And that's so powerful. That's powerful. So there's no better feeling than our people that are down here to know that their nation has sent somebody to come look for them, to come watch out for them. And I've heard it many times from our people that I remember saying, James, I'm not ready. But just to know that you're here, that when I am ready, that gives me a sense of comfort.
James Harry had spent a lot of time on the streets of the downtown east side, using cocaine to run from his demons and the hurt until he was exhausted or out of money.
By this time I had 3 kids, and they're all waiting for me. My wife and my 3 kids are waiting for me, but here I was down here being selfish, running from my demons, running from all that hurt. The way I was doing it was trying to numb that pain.
8 years ago, he stopped running. James turned and faced the trauma and hurt.
That next morning, I woke up, and I looked at my wife, and we're sleeping on the floor, and I looked at my wife and I said, that's it. We're going to save this marriage, or we're going to keep our kids in our life. This is it. We got to quit. We relied on our elders. We relied on our land, and went to AA meetings every night, and we were challenged 90 meetings, 90 days. And we went, we took another step, and we went there every day for the whole year.
James's lived experience has shaped his unique approach to Indigenous outreach.
We have a lot of beautiful people doing outreach work there, but I think ours is unique, where it's a nation-to-nation member. It's a familiar face, and that you gain that trust, establish that trust, and let them know that you're not just a flash in the pan, but you're there. And and once you get that trust, that you can start talking about what other steps we can take to the healing. Healing's got to take place before anything else. Healing's got to take place if you're going to be successful in housing, if you're going to be successful in a job. That healing's got to take place. You see people that are, that are trying to be housed and just can't be housed because they're so used to that dysfunctional life, right? And before you know it, they're back out there, right? And doing the same thing, and they're still angry, they're still hurt, they're still resentful, right? So the healing's got to take place before we move forward. We can't move forward, whether it's your nation, individually, family, unless we start the healing. Right? And maybe that community means, maybe they're far away and they grew up in a community, but it could be somebody that they're familiar face with.
A familiar face is good medicine. Knowing that your people care about you will bring healing and restore a sense of belonging for Indigenous people living rough. It will take a village to weave back together all my relations. Supporting collaborative Indigenous-led approaches and organizations is essential to building trust, hope, healing, and empowerment.
In Lekwungen, I still know means good medicine. And the essence of I still know good medicine can be from your spirit, your heart. It's something that you exercise and practice as an everyday expression of helping uplift people. And it's not something you do from 8:30 to 4:30, and then you go home and flick off that light switch, right? It's something that's with you 24 hours a day. It's with you. You grew up with it. It's around you. Your family has taught you, whether it's through the longhouse or through canoe pulling or other traditions that your family participates in, and community work with, in your own nation, where you carry through and conduct yourself in sharing that Aistilnuch, that good medicine. And Lekwungen culture, Aistilnuch is powerful. When we're serving and supporting our Indigenous homelessness community, that Aistilnuch good medicine work, it was through outreach, it was through maintaining that role of engagement with our people who are living on the streets, by bringing food, by talking to them, filling out applications and following up, coming back and taking them for coffee, letting them know they're not alone, and shouldering up with other Aistilnuch good medicine warriors from other outreach agencies, Indigenous outreach agencies, and letting them know we stand together in solidarity and supporting and serving you.
Understanding and embodying good medicine will be essential in ending Indigenous homelessness. Indigenous outreach workers have a deep understanding of the cultural and systemic barriers that prevent Indigenous peoples from accessing the services they need. They are in the best position to share good medicine.
I honestly believe having Indigenous outreach worker is so valuable due to being aware and understanding that these are our moms and fathers and brothers and sisters, relatives in the streets who are suffering. And when you go into the communities where you have Indigenous homeless, they may be survivors of residential school or of Indian hospital or the 60 scoop, other things that we sometimes take for granted in the settler agencies, not being fully aware of the relationships. And Indigenous outreach workers are able to bridge that gap in the relationship and provide that respect and support, as well as serve our Indigenous communities in ways that are often overlooked, and our people fall through the gaps.
For agencies and organizations to embrace good medicine and lasting truth and reconciliation, that will mean investing in permanent Indigenous outreach workers, communications, support, and leadership in response to Indigenous homelessness.
Ultimately, I envision seeing every nonprofit housing agency having Indigenous leadership directorships, being able to create true equitable partnerships in decision making, so the point in time count for Indigenous homelessness is reduced and even eliminated.
When I was walking around, I'll use the term homeless now because that's what they use, but I was walking around in my own community here in Vernon. I always gravitated toward a place called Polson Park. I felt safe there. I always ended up there, whether I was too drunk or whatever, I would always end up there. And I slept a few times in a particular place over by the Rose Garden down there. I don't know if anybody knows Polson Park, but there's a Rose Garden there. And where I'd slept a few times was about 50 feet from there. And I was talking to one of my elders after I had healed up and told him about where I'd stayed, what I did. And he said, you know what, hold on. And he told me that, the reason why that you were attracted to Polson Park is that my great-great-great-grandmother was born around where the Rose Garden would be. And Polson Park is actually our traditional summer campground. And to me, it was like my ancestors were calling me there to keep me safe. And that's where I had my vision that started me on my path. So that's kind of home. where all our traditions are, where all our ancestors are. And the term homeless? No, I wasn't homeless. I was home. I just didn't have a roof over my head and a place that I could call home, my house, my apartment, whatever. I was in my homeland. And it's always really struck me as that I didn't realize that maybe my ancestors were calling me to a safe area to help me to find that vision of I wanted to heal and how to do it. And it was given to me as a gift. My biggest hope for our community is educate and heal. There's too many of our people walking around angry, sad, depressed, and they just don't know why. And part of my job is to educate on intergenerational traumas and historical traumas and how to overcome them. We have too many people that we're losing that don't need to be lost. Just that little bit of education on why we are certain ways, like the intergenerational trauma, helps so tremendously help a person heal. That it's part of what I do is educate. So I guess for me, the biggest thing would be a healthy community, a happy community, a well-balanced community, because most of us communities right now don't have any of that balance. And we desperately need them if we were gonna move forward in all our communities, in our nations. Especially us as the Syilx Nation, as Syilx people, we have what you call an oral history. It's our chaptik. And in these stories, you can interpret them any way you want. Our chaptik isn't a history of dates and times, but it is the meaning of who we are as a people. And we've gotten away from that. The values that these teach, that balance in life, that interconnection with the land, back to our culture, back to our language. I mean, we're not necessarily going to be able to go back and roam the way we used to be, but the way we think, the way we look at the world, the way we view things is what we're looking for to become whole again. And I think that's what I mean by a balanced community. We're healthy physically, we're back on the land, we're doing, traditional berry picking, traditional hunting, fishing, all of that. Emotionally, I mean, once you learn about the intergenerational traumas and learn what it's done to you, and some of us have built up barriers and blocks, then we can overcome them. Mentally, we need to start thinking like our chaptik tells us to think. That the interconnectedness of all things, the Tamih, all living things, Timhula, the land. We need to go back to that to recapture that spirituality of the essence of who we are, that happiness, that balance, and that center. I guess if that makes sense, that's what balance means to me for my community.
How do we bring the love and warmth of home to the cement, noise, and cold of the streets? For Auntie Glow and the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness Society, that journey began with food, respect, and love.
In our culture, guests never leave hungry. And so for the first couple of months, I brought in an electric griddle so I could at least offer French toast, grilled cheese sandwiches, bacon and eggs. Our family room, it was a safe place. When they came in, I didn't want them to call me Mrs. Rose or Gloria. I just said, I'm Auntie Glow, and I don't shake hands, I hug. I think it's an honor for me that they'll all refer to me as Auntie Glow. I had told some of the fellas that would slip off of the path, and I'd say, I'm going to get a shirt for you, and I'm going to put Auntie Glow says no.
The Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness Society is a charitable organization focused solely on supporting our Indigenous street family. The ACEHS plays an important role in sharing good medicine, leading to long-term systemic change and healing. Like the Coast Salish Big House, the ACEHS creates a home of love and care within 4 large pillars. Each corner post provides a different perspective and support to the house.
What is unique about what we have to offer from an Indigenous-led practice is that we are really finding and wanting to seek out those pathways that are led by the Indigenous street community voices to really find those connections to retaining self-identity, to connection to language, connection to the seasons, to food, to like those moments in our life that are important to us. Many of our populations live away from home, or many have actually shared with us, you know, I've been a part of the 60 Scoop, or I'm actually a product of being in care. And the things that we would offer differently that makes us unique and that makes us distant from what others are offering in supportive housing is that we're really trying to pull in our knowledge keepers. We're really trying to pull in our community supports, whether they're Métis, Inuit, Nuchanoth, Coast Salish, Kwakwaka'wakw, or even from different parts of the mainland if they have like Cree ancestry, or is trying to find a place to honor them and where they're at and creating those further connections to community and finding a place and home for them in an area where they choose to want to live.
I can't imagine ever being brought up without that embrace, without that love. And we have first, second, third generation, like the residential school. The last one was closed in the 90s. There's the 60s snatch where children were taken away from their families and knew they came from somewhere but lost that identity. You have to have your culture. You have to have that identity.
It took multiple generations to cut the interconnections that formed Indigenous homes and identity, but the roots are deep and vast, filled with patience, love, dignity, respect, and the wisdom of the knowledge keepers. The new seeds are taking root, and they will grow into large cedars and spruce trees. Just wait and see.
My father, one of his words were, "Isens Gilhuida." We have not disappeared. It didn't matter what the government did to us. We are still here.
So the tattoo for me is to honor my grandmothers and my grandfathers. So these are mountains. And so for me, it signifies the amount, the horrific journey that they took, that is residential school, Indian hospitals and all of that, and survived. And so I honor them with my tattoo. Because I never lived with my family, the one thing that I always understand is that I do walk with the wisdom of my grandmothers and grandfathers. I've been homeless since I was 9 months old. My mother took me to the hospital because I was sick. This was in Vancouver. And like any good mother, that's what you do when your child is sick, you take him to the hospital. And it was St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. I look at the hospital today and I visualize my mother taking me in there. And what happened was the nurses, I don't know if the nuns were there, I don't know who was there, but they looked at my mother because my mother was Indigenous and just looked at her and said, "I'm sorry." And they took me out of her arms. And she had to leave the hospital without me in her arms. And thus began my journey of living in foster care. I am Kwakwakiwak. My mother and my grandfather are from Alert Bay, so in Alert Bay we say Gela Kesla. My name is Bernice Camano. I am from the Kwakwakiwak people, Hawaiian. My great-grandfather was Hawaiian, thus the name Camano. And my granny, whom I'm named after, is Musqueam from Coast Salish. And then on my father's side, he's Halsik. And so I'm from the Humchit family from Bella Bella. So that's who I am.
Good medicine is more than tangible services. It is the intangible love of saying hello, going for coffee, chatting over a cigarette, or crying over the loss of a child. Indigenous outreach workers like Bernice bring humanity to the streets for Indigenous persons.
I can walk down the street and see someone and say, "Let's go for lunch." And we go and have a beautiful lunch. Or, you know, they come into my office and sit down and we can cry together for 2 hours. I don't have any kind of special training. I just have my heart, my understanding, and the compassion for the work that I do, and honor the people that trust me enough to come through my door and share with me. That's probably the biggest piece that I have, is that people trust me and care about me and we laugh and cry together, you know, and that means the world to me. I never thought that I would ever be sitting here in front of you talking about the work that I do, but I'm so honored. As I say, I honor my grandmothers and grandfathers for giving me the strength to do the work that I do.
What was my history? What did my auntie, uncle, cousins, parents go through? I am Karina Morvan from the Nisga'a Nation. I come from the Whelp of Githoon. I remember one time sitting in the tall bushes and grass. I was happy as pie, sitting there and eating berries.
For Karina, these safe and happy memories were soon replaced by memories of sexual abuse and shame. Growing up with that trauma led her to a cycle of addiction, abusive relationships, and homelessness.
I had so much stuff happen to me growing up for many years, not by just one person, multiple people have harmed me physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, and all that pain inside, it just hurt so much. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't want to feel it. I was so ashamed of the stuff that I went through.
Karina never lost sight of that happy and safe child, that dream of a home that brought the good medicine of food, play, innocence, and love.
Home to me means safety, security, sense of belonging, trust, comfort, just, like a sigh, like a relief of, just, I don't know, it's just like a warm feeling of just pure love, that connection.
Homeless and fleeing from an abusive relationship, Karina arrived in Terrace with her 2 children. It would be the last time she would face having to live rough.
Yeah, about 13 years ago, I was homeless, and I had my 2 older kids with me, and all they had was a backpack. And that's all we had when we started in Terrace. And so my healing started at Kasan, and I built myself up from there. I love that what they have to offer there to help women that are not educated on, the resources that are out there for us. And I never knew that all the resources they have there for Kasan, for women or anybody that's experiencing homelessness or, addictions that are in place. So that's where my healing journey started, was Kasan. And I remember talking with the link worker that helped me build my goals. And one of the things I let her know is I'm gonna work for Kasan once I get better and, and I get stronger. And then she asked why. And I was like, well, I want to give back to what was freely given to me and to be able to help other people. So many years down the line, so now I work for Kasan. It's one of my goals that I didn't realize that was going to fall into place along the years as they went by, right? But it's so awesome. I love working at my place of work. I cook for, the homeless and provide meals, and I understand clearly what they're going through, like whatever emotions and feelings they're going through. I understand and I get it, and it really hits the heart a lot. And, I care about the people that are in there. And it's really touching to, have them be able to open up and, be comfortable and safe. Just from a meal, it will make, spark that conversation. And, having somebody open up that, sometimes doesn't, and gives them, they're just happy. It brings happiness to them, and a good memory of home. It's been going on 13 years this month that I've been clean from drugs, alcohol, and smoking. And I'm gonna get emotional. So last year was the first time that I wanted to live and that I'm happy. And I got what I've been looking for, is that love, not only for myself, but from somebody else.
A safe place to dream, good food, and peer support are key elements in helping end Indigenous homelessness. As a child growing up in Alberta, Angel and her family often stayed temporarily in shelters or couch surfed at a friend's home. It wasn't until later in life that Angel realized how unusual this was.
We didn't know it was homelessness at the time. We were like 6 years old. I was 6 years old, 6 or 7, not having a place to stay, and I thought it was normal until I grew up and I was telling people, and they tell me that it's not normal for kids to go through, not having a place to go home to sometimes, because a woman's shelters aren't homes. They're just a starting point to help you get there. They're not like a place for you to stay long terms or anything, and we just thought it was like a normal place where people go.
At the age of 17, Angel faced homelessness on her own. One day, while living in Alberta with her family, Angel's mother bought her a bus ticket to Victoria, called a cab, and took her to the bus depot.
Yeah, we fought really bad when I got older, and I think she got fed up with it. Bought me like my bus ticket, took me to the bus station. Me and her literally cabbed 20 minutes to the bus station. It was like really the awkwardest ride. And then she actually gave me a hug and she said, "Bye, are you coming back?" And I'm like, "Coming back? What?" And then she actually put me on the bus, waved, and I went on my way, cried. Actually there was a Native lady on that bus. I think she see me crying. And she gave me cookies and clothes.
Angel arrived in Victoria alone and had nowhere to go.
When you're by yourself though, when you're homeless by yourself, it is so lonely. You just don't know who to ask. You feel like you're lost, and it's hard to tell, it's hard to ask people, be like, hey, can you help me? Because you feel kind of shamed about it. I used to feel actual big shame about it because I'd be like, all these people, like all my friends are doing okay. They're going to college, they're going to school and all doing all these things. And I don't even have a place to stay or food to eat at night. You know, it feels lonely and you feel like nervous asking. You just gotta learn to ask.
Angel did reach out for help, found a shelter, and began to apply for jobs. 4 years later, Angel is now 21. She has stable housing and work, and she is upgrading her education. Her younger siblings are now facing homelessness too, but she has words of wisdom from her lived experience.
The advice I would give to them is actually talk to your social worker, tell them what you need, like tell them what I need a place to stay. I need to get my IDs in order because I didn't have like an ID or my birth certificate was kind of hard to get. And I have a passport now because I traveled to the US once. Like I asked them for the help to apply to these places. Ask them like social worker, something that will help you.
When Indigenous youth experience homelessness, feelings of loneliness and shame can run deep. Social workers can play a pivotal role in the lives of youth experiencing homelessness if they approach them with love, openness, and willingness to meet them where they're at.
I'm Daniel Sands, and I'm Two-Spirit. I'm gay. I'm Cree, French, English. I'm an intergenerational residential school survivor. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm living with HIV. I have experiences with homelessness, substance use, abuse, being bullied, experiences with mental wellness challenges like depression and anxiety. I'm neurodiverse. I have ADHD. I use a manual wheelchair, and her name is Diva because she doesn't do stairs and she likes big bathrooms that she can turn around in. And she helps me self-advocate for accessibility by reminding me that I can take space and I can make space. And she's like my backup for self-advocating for accessibility. So my dream is to help make the world more accessible, more inclusive, more caring, more loving, more healed. At the time when I was sleeping outside, I thought it was just this one event in my life where I was reaching a tipping point with my addiction, my active addiction, and my life was unmanageable, and I couldn't hold a job down, and relationships were really difficult, and I went back home, and I was struggling so much that it affected my relationships with my family to the point where I had to leave. I didn't know how hurt I was and how much healing I needed at that point. I thought it came down to this one event. Since my family, I couldn't be around my family, I couldn't be around anybody, that there was something wrong with me, that there's some failing. Looking back on it now, I had been homeless way longer than actually sleeping outside. Even when I was in my 20s and I was working full time, I had housing insecurity the entire time. I had housing insecurity even as a kid, and security issues as a kid. And I didn't really understand that until very recently with, working with my counselor of childhood traumas and triggers and stuff like that. So you don't have to sleep outside to be homeless. which I learned. Sleeping outside to me was like a real like, oh, now I'm homeless. When I had been in, various states of homelessness in the past and growing up, and yeah. In September 2015 was when I was sleeping outside and was diagnosed with HIV and cancer. But yeah, homeless going into the hospital, was, at the hospital, and then, roughly 3 months in total. And then they're like, hey, you're discharged, and I was still homeless, and that's also a huge flaw in the system. But the care and the support can't end there, right? So when they said you're going to discharge soon, I said nope. I said absolutely not. I stuck my heels in and said I'm going to need housing, and we're going to figure this out. And so I dug my heels in and I said nope. Find a way, I am not leaving here and going sleeping outside again. Find a way. And so I was eventually connected with Pacifica Housing, and I've been with them ever since. And this is the first time I felt securely housed in my life. Like, I put art, I have plants. If I were to, had housing insecurity, I never would have gotten these plants because I would have been scared, how do I move them? Where am I gonna go next place? So being securely housed, it changed everything. It increased my self-worth, my self-value. I was like, I deserve to have a nice place. I deserve to have a safe place. I deserve to have somewhere where I can feel at home and decorate the way I want and have things that I want, have people over. I have a fish tank. There's no way I could have had a fish tank when I had housing insecurity. How am I gonna move a fish tank? But I'm able to now because I live in subsidized housing.
Ending Indigenous homelessness will mean sharing good medicine that treats the intergenerational trauma in the individual and restores balance in the community. Supporting Indigenous outreach workers and programs to share the stories that shape each nation will help Indigenous people reconnect with who they are and the values that give them purpose.
It took me a long time to live in this world, and a lot of time I couldn't feel at home in my heart. Right, so that was a type of homelessness. I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like where I was. I feel like something was missing. But homelessness as not having a home, for me, it was in and out. What kept me to survive that and not fall into the trap of, because lots of people, they get homeless sometimes and they give up. Because there's a sense of people make you feel that you don't worth nothing. My name is Impata Maigan in Woodland Cree. In translation in English would be Running Wolf. My name before I did my rite of passage was, by my mother, my parents, was Nanook. And I belonged to the Bear Clan.
At 13 years old, Impata Maigan, Running Wolf, went through his rite of passage, a lengthy ceremony that taught him profound life lessons and tested his hunting and survival skills. It was through this ceremony that he earned the name Impata Maigan.
When I did my rite of passage, what I got out of it is I got to know myself. Because I remember spending myself in a teepee and really concentrating and with the Creator and really searching deep inside of me who I was. When you are, you do your rite of passage, it's like you're reborn. You become a man, you're reborn. And then you explain a certain maturity things, how you should live. And that helped me a lot to understand how life should be and to communicate better with my Creator, to communicate better with Gitche humanity, to understand what He wanted out of me And that's what got me of homeless. That's what got me to go for jobs. And that's what I kept my head up, basically, and press on. And eventually I came out of homelessness.
His rebirth and the traditional teachings passed down to him made him different and out of place in the dominant culture, but also gave him strength and resilience as he faced residential school, multiple foster homes, and workplace harassment and racism that resulted in seasons of homelessness.
Because my culture, because what was taught to me, I knew that I worth something, that I was somebody. And because that, I eventually caught people that saw me different and started giving me a break in life. And then I started going forward.
Impata is now an elder himself. As an elder, Impata shares this good medicine to help restore balance in others, teaching the Creator's laws, how to communicate with the Creator through dance, and the many lessons taught in traditional skills, such as constructing regalia and foraging.
For me, as an elder, it's amazing to see that when people are learning to dance. You know, I was in Native Day sometime and teaching kids how to dance in their first step, and you can see the joy in their face as they're learning that. You know, it's rewarding beyond explanation. Being elder for me is good medicine, and dancing for me is good medicine. And being there for my people is good medicine. That's why I'm an elder, because I like to be a person that's there for people. I like to carry my culture. I like to help people.
Culture saves lives by giving people purpose, meaning, and resilience to heal their relationship with themselves, the land, and others.
Homeless Gitane, being raised and brought up with the culture and the tradition, and knowing other Lachgabu, other wolves. We have 4 clans. When you know who all the Pedek, all the other wolves, that's home. You're safe. You take care of each other. We support each other. It's not just my own family, my blood relation. It's clans. It's when you're seen in the community and seen in the feast hall and you're working together. So that's family, that's home.
What if everyone living rough, sleeping outside and on the streets were all housed today? Would homelessness come to an end? The answer is no. Especially for Indigenous communities. To understand why, we must welcome 4 truths that Indigenous peoples across Canada have shared. The first truth is that in many Indigenous worldviews, home is holistic and reciprocal. Home is more about cultural connections than any built structure where a person lives. These essential connections shape what many refer to as all my relations. Houselessness or sleeping rough is a symptom of homelessness, but it is not homelessness. The second truth is that severing these relationships and preventing Indigenous people from experiencing all my relations is homelessness. The third truth is that Canada's child welfare system has replaced the residential school system in its effect on Indigenous children. Indigenous children make up 7.7% of the child population in Canada, yet they make up 52.2% of children in foster care. In some provinces, it is as high as 90%. Although they have shelter, the child welfare system cuts Indigenous children from the circles of relationships that root them, leading many into the prison system or onto the streets when they age out. So if everyone living rough and sleeping outside were to be housed today, homelessness would not end for Indigenous people. This is the fourth truth. In the northwest interior of British Columbia, surrounding the headwaters of the Skeena River, within the unceded territory of the Gitxsan Nation, 5 villages are challenging the status quo and transforming the child welfare system. Cheryl Williams and the Gitxsan Child and Family Services Society believe that the critical step to ending Indigenous homelessness is bringing Indigenous children home.
It's ideally the human contact, the humanistic piece of us that need to feel like we belong. So yes, although a lot of our children are on the streets, lost through the system, have been damaged by the system, the critical bridge is to bring them back home. They need to come home. They need to come, whether they stay, whether they don't. Once, I truly believe, once they have instilled their footing of just feeling amongst their ancestors on the land base they belong, they always will have that within them. They know they have a land base and they know they belong.
Since 2005, the Gitxsan Child and Family Services Society, with the help of each community, has been on a journey toward regaining control over the welfare of Gitxsan children. The most important step has been to build the nation's capacity to welcome children home. This began with Gitxsan foster homes, guardianship, and cultural camps, allowing children to stay on the land or temporarily visit and access their culture and language. And it has grown into a yearly Bringing Our Children Home event. Some sew vests with the children's clan embroidered on them. Others gather and smoke salmon. And many more harvest and can local berries. At the end of the season, they have a large feast where the community comes together to welcome children who are outside of the community and who are in the child welfare system. The children are given their gifts, and they are introduced to their elders, family, language, and culture. The biggest challenge to bringing more children home has been housing.
We could have easily pushed to have all our children come back here, but we don't have the housing. That's been our detriment. That's the downfall right now, of course, is housing, which is across Canada, across the world.
The nation of Gitxsan have a dream to build a longhouse that would provide a safe living space for multiple children and act as a site for teaching and healing. In 2018, with the help of Patrick Stewart and advocates at BC Housing, the Gitxsan Child and Family Services Society was able to secure funding for the first longhouse in Glenvowel. And in the summer of 2022, construction has begun, and hope begins to take shape.
Hope for Gitxsan children is for them to know they do belong and they are cared for. We have 62 house, who we call them Hawilp, and every child matters, every child belongs. And they need to know, whether they're adults, teens, or what have you, that they belong to a mother clan and they belong to a father clan.
We're all part of the tree of relationships, and this means that change is the responsibility of every one of us. Learn more and get involved today.